Welcome back to the New England Camp Podcast. I am Kyle Winkle, Communications Manager with ACA New England. Today, in recognition and celebration of May being known as Mental Health Awareness Month, I am pleased to be joined by Ryan Hindenach, licensed clinical mental health counselor, and a feature in the New Hampshire Community Behavioral Health Association's video, Mental Health Supports at New Hampshire Summer Camps, which serves as inspiration for what is possible and worth considering for camps across the country. We want to share and spread mental health access to camps all across the world. As a quick overview to frame this conversation, why it's unique, we know that camps have multiple ways of implementing mental health care dedicated for campers and staff, which includes but is not limited to having mental health care professionals on call or standby through some sort of partnership, having staff trained in mental health first aid, having therapeutic opportunities built into camp programming, which could include art therapy, agricultural therapy, horticultural therapy. Organizations also exist to serve as mental health consultants. And the avenue that Ryan is going to talk about is still seemingly new and on the rise when you consider a licensed therapist actually proactively posting up on site, working directly with a summer camp. We're thrilled to hear about this as not only an opportunity for the people in camp, but also for clinicians as well. It's amazing news for the field, and shout out to Project Real Job, which is an initiative to connect professional workforce with the joy uniquely found at camp. So, Ryan, thank you for joining the podcast. How are you doing? And if you don't mind sharing a little bit about your professional role outside the world of camp.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Thank you. I appreciate the introduction. It was spectacular. My name is Ryan Hindenach. I'm a licensed clinical mental health counselor. I've been in the professional field of like mental health therapy as a therapist for about 7 years now. I started off in mental health in general since I was 18 years old. I'm 34 now. I worked as a camp counselor for the YMCA, making $8.25 an hour, wrestling like freaking 20 little, third graders, and trying to canal them into behaving, into, hopefully building that into a therapeutic process and in my education and my schooling. All throughout undergrad and grad school, I worked at a psych hospital called New Hampshire Hospital, and I was kind of like a float staff, so I got a lot of exposure to things like psychotic disorders and personality disorders, high risk behaviors, and that was a little bit more of a first grade all the way into geriatrics. So
Mhm.
a lot of experience there. And then I had an internship over in Massachusetts where I got to do and kind of hone in my skills working again with a variety of different people. I got to work at McLean, which was really awesome, great exposure there. I got to work with people inside their homes, and that was a whole new environment instead of like a professional setting. So I have I would say like a really good rounded and well-rounded experience throughout my years of kind of being in the mental health field. And definitely working at the camp was like a whole new adventure that I was not expecting, but very, very fortunate, very, very grateful. And I got to learn a whole bunch of it. And I can go on and on about that. But that's kind of like a little bit of a background of kind of what where my humble beginnings started to kind of where I'm at now.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Kyle.
No, that's amazing. I think it's cool to learn the breadth of some of your professional experience, including a stint as a camp counselor.
Mhm.
And so that makes me curious, whenever you found out that, hey, there's an opportunity for you to return to camp essentially with a different role, a different kind of counselor, if you will. What was that news like, and what was kind of some of your initial thoughts?
So it was really exciting. So the past 7 years, I've been associated with one of the community mental health centers. It's called Greater Manchester Mental Health Center, or the Mental Health Center of Greater Manchester. I was getting kind of mixed up. And just doing community mental health in a variety of different departments. I had a transition period where I went to fee for service. So clinicians who are in the community mental health like realm. Um, there's a variety of different roles you can take. There's some that are a little bit more intense and kind of dealing with psychotic disorders. There's some that have a little bit have in office and then there's kind of this fee for service role. And then after a little bit of kind of like in the muck of it, if you will, I transferred over to the fee for service, and I was kind of just seeing people as they come and kind of generally building up a caseload, kind of working as a contractor. So my role was basically I would work with different organizations that needed assistance in mental health. So, for instance, like a local university needed another counselor, so they reached the mental health center at Greater Manchester and said, "Hey, we need a clinician." And I was working with them, which was perfect for during the school year. But then my summers were kind of open, and I would have to like quickly transition into like building a caseload, treating them, getting them better, and then quickly going back and ready for the school year. And it was kind of difficult, as any clinician knows, to like be on like a crunch time
Hmm.
for someone's treatment. So I was very like fortunate enough to like to build a rapport with like the contractor, and having that summer free. The contractor who like kind of organizes all the contracts reaches out to me and said, "Hey, Ryan, there's this new COVID bill that's kind of helping bring clinicians into one of the local camps." And the camp was, Boys and Girls Club. It was called Camp Foster. And how would you like working with kids? It's really like, laid back. There's not too much pressure. And I was like, "Are you kidding me? You basically want me to like hang out with kids and like color and just be like be a camp counselor all over again, but for like my big boy salary? Like, absolutely, sign me up." I would definitely love that. And it started off as kind of like this really this idea, this concept of like, yeah, just be like a camp counselor and just, be there as a support person. And definitely, like, as I was integrated into the camp, you learn real quickly just how much I was actually needed.
Hmm.
Uh, and like that was like really, I guess, like rewarding in some ways, and also very telling, just kind of how, I mean, obviously COVID did have a huge impact on a lot of these kiddos. Also, like the Boys and Girls Club, the wonderful, wonderful organization. Um, and I was like really surprised on the diversity, because my initial thought would be there would be a lot of I don't want to say like trouble inner youth kids, but that was my impression. But we had everything from trouble inner youth kids all the way to individuals who like grew up with a lot of privilege, had amazing opportunities, and they were all kind of intersected and intertwined. So like the problems also completely different, right? Like,
Hmm.
oh no, my parents both got sent to jail for drug related charges, to, oh no, my mom and dad had an argument over dinner while we were having a family dinner, right? It's like
Hmm.
such different contrast, both, but however, the emotional intensity very similar. So
Okay.
yeah, yeah, very, it was kind of fun, clinically speaking, to kind of be in the midst of all this. But yeah, so I guess like that's in a long-winded answer, kind of how I got involved and what I've already been seeing so far as a counselor there.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I love the way you framed it around you had this background of meeting people where they were at, whether
Mm,
that be at universities or with different organizations. And so that element was not completely new to you. This
mm,
is something that professionally you'd already kind of been doing. And then whenever you got that call to go back to camp, it was something that you were excited to go back into, which is so thrilling. I mean, we talk about through our association here at ACA New England constantly about how camp is such a important step for people's professional lives. And so, like you said, kind of the full circle moment is really inspiring to me, at least. So that's really exciting. Okay, so I'm curious with that role of like you meeting people where they're at. I think a lot of people have this tendency to think of meeting with a therapist as like you go to a a very clinical office or some sort of, square room with like nice pillows and stuff like that, which is great. There's nothing wrong with that. Um, Tell me a little bit about your therapeutic space whenever it comes to like you're actually entering into these camps.
mm.
Did you have any kind of reserved office that you were able to use, or was it literally meeting the kids where they were? And that could look in a multitude of different ways. Like, what did that look like from a clinician standpoint?
Yeah, so again, like a lot of nuances to this, and very, I would say also like being very mindful of like my space as well as the kiddo space as well. So
Hmm.
yeah, the camp that I happened to be at was an outdoor camp in the woods on a lake or on a pond, right?
Mm.
So different little cabin areas that were like not enclosed. There was a center kind of area that was like it was called the games room or a games cabin where like it would be if there was poor weather the kids can kind of hustle in but not fully enclosed, so still like there was a roof, no walls, and then there was a little like nurses station or like kind of like a little small office where parents could talk to some of the supporting staff. If the nurses would hang out in there in case a kid got like scraped their knee or something.
Hmm.
So not a whole lot of privacy at all. And the camp, I would say, I mean, I couldn't give you the numbers, but I would say around 300-ish kiddos running all the way around, right?
Hmm.
So there was definitely like an element of a hard time to find some sort of privacy, and then also having to be very mindful, like kind of calling it what it is, but like as a male therapist and like being cognizant that like sometimes it's not best practice to be kind of alone with a kid,
Hmm.
when that with not a whole lot of eyes or so like being mindful of that. It's like, all right, here's a big open field
Hmm.
where there's not a whole lot of kids. Let's go for a walk and
Hmm.
like let's kind of set like kind of do a little loop around there, right? So I think you would kind of have to think on a fly what's appropriate. um uh, 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 Sometimes you would see like a disruption within like a group of kids, like there would be like let's say an argument. What a great moment to kind of have like a little psychotherapy skills group
Hmm.
within like four kids who are having an altercation to teach like interpersonal effectiveness skills, right?
Hmm.
So in that context, like at a lunch table, you can kind of use a group of kids and sit with them and have a little psychotherapy group session very briefly. Or what you can do is you can see a situation, take the kid out, go for a walk, and it kind of takes that like a creative clinical mindset in order to kind of assess what is needed in that moment and
Hmm.
prioritize it. Mental health triaging is the best way I can kind of explain it. And it requires a lot of that as well as kind of being creative with the space that is available in that moment, whether that's a walk, again, a walk around the games cabin, a walk outside in the field, being mindful of where you are and eyes on you, making sure that you're, or sometimes they would even be like a consultant role with you're talking to one of the staff members and helping them adjust to having a little bit more of a trauma informed approach to things as well. So like that's also a whole different scenario where like, obviously you're not going to come out in a lecturing kind of way in front of peers or all that. So bringing another one of the younger camp counselors who is also probably like 16 to 18-year old, right? They're like I
Right.
remember in that age, and also helping them in a way that's non-shaming and more of a learning process as well, and being able to adapt to whatever it is. So yeah, it was definitely, I would say, like almost like an EMT mental health counselor role sometimes to a little bit more structured because they have like the camp that I happen to be at, it was broken down in periods, and they would have like different little activities, and sometimes I would just go to an activity and engage with the kids whatever activity they're doing and just make small talk, so which is a lot more kind of loose and laid back and would offer a little bit more room opportunity, have kind of like facilitate like healthy conversations. And so it really does, like, I guess again, like it really depends on what's happening. But yeah, definitely the farthest from a closed in space with a comfy couch and what usually where everyone's just sweaty, filled with sunscreen, swatting flies while you're kind of at it and trying not to get eaten alive by insects. So uh not it's great because it wouldn't you wouldn't think it'd be the best environment for um like a therapeutic session. And also I think because like you're in it with them and you're witnessing all the little nuances that happens while they're in the moment experiencing a mental health issue, right? It's also a great way to it's probably one of the best ways to actually implement a really good in the moment in vitro therapeutic skill to really help the kiddo, I don't know, maybe learn something or understand a concept or grasp something. So that's really cool.
That's beautiful. And it sounds like it requires a little bit of flexibility on your end to just be able to triage and assess the moment and to make an appropriate decision from there. And it sounds like that worked out really well. And I can see how that's actually such a benefit to the campers because, there's growing studies on the benefits of being out in nature and those during those kinds of ex therapeutic experiences. Walk and talk therapy is a thing. Adventure therapy is a big thing. And so these are things that are actually naturally implemented in what you do because of the setting that you're in, which for some people might see that as a barrier, but for you, you're kind of flipping it and turning it into a tremendous opportunity. I love the example that you mentioned of being at the lunch table and like hearing a dispute and turning that into an opportunity for just communication skills, building those pathways for stronger relationships. So I absolutely love that. That sounds really thrilling and amazing. So you kind of mentioned some of the things right there of like it seems like I would imagine you'd have to be kind of flexible and your social awareness probably needs to be to a certain degree. I'm curious. I think you mentioned that this would be kind of your last go around this past year working with the camps on site. Any kind of advice or words of wisdom that you might have for camps who are considering bringing on a clinician? Or maybe partnering with a local organization to implement that, or maybe be for clinicians who might be able to proactively seek this kind of opportunity, especially if it's something that is life-giving, like you said, the chance to work with these kids. Any thoughts on either of those perspectives?
Yeah, I definitely think having maybe I would say like having a clinical mental health counselor and possibly a social worker who's very experienced with programming
Mhm.
and kind of combining both, like having two of those on site would be very beneficial. So you have someone kind of again working the triage, and then also someone who has a structured programming schedule set out throughout the day or throughout the curriculum of the summer or whatever it may be, where you can have like a space for them to also like, I don't know, I guess like I don't want to say relax in, but like be,
Mhm.
just be.
Mhm.
Uh, and also maybe like learn a thing or two in kind of a more of a creative way, in a more structured way, I should say. I think it's very hard to play the role of a triager and also have something structured because the second you have a plan with a bunch of kids, it's not going to go according to plan,
Mhm.
right? And that's just kind of how it is. I really do think having that extra, like an extra someone who has more of like a macro concept and that may be a me thing, right? Personally, like I tend to see the trees, not the forest. um as best as I try to see the whole picture, right? I think I'm more focused on every individual person who's in front of me. So my role was really, I would kind of again walk around the camp and kind of do my triaging thing. I could also see how it would be beneficial to have a whole nother space programming and then trying to teach a kiddo from day one to day whatever, like 90,
Mhm.
on interpersonal effectiveness skills, emotion regulation skills, something along those lines in a structured way. And then maybe collaborating between the two would probably be very beneficial.
Mhm.
So I would say like that is definitely like one thing that I think would be helpful
Mhm.
and ideal. The other thing, I think having a space in the Boys and Girls Club towards the end, they built a little cat like a almost like a STEM cabin where they had like beanbag chairs and relaxing to be like for kids to kind of go and relax at the tail end of my time there, which was like really really great. I think like a space like that would be very beneficial for sure. And I wouldn't, my advice would be don't be afraid to not use that as well because of how powerful it can be, to just have in the moment a therapeutic um, intervention right then and there, in the space that the the dysregulation is occurring in. That can be very powerful as well. Um, I think my role again also as like like as a consultant to the staff, like I for future clinicians, don't underestimate that. Like I didn't come in there saying like to the staff saying like, hey, listen, this is how things are done. My way is really to support them.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's also very important. Kind of like change doesn't happen by conquering,
Mm-hmm.
an organization, because that's just not going to work. It really does. It's a collaborative experience working on the same goal. So I felt like I had a really, really good relationship with everyone from the director to the 16-year-old counselors and trainings to, and everybody in between. And that came with trust and coming in there with like a beginner's mind. And I can't stress that enough too, is I'm not an expert. I have experience and I have education and I have trainings and I have all these things, and I'm here to help you in whatever way that you may want to take advantage of that. So I think building a strong trust and foundation with the organization, personally first, is so important. And I think when you're doing that consultant role,
Mm-hmm.
I think that just allows the information to be taken a lot easier. So I think building that rapport first is I can't stress that enough, is like critical, because at the end of the day, if you have a burnt out organization, no matter what therapeutic techniques that I'm doing, it's not going to be effective if you have a burnt out staff. So,
Mm-hmm.
don't underestimate how powerful of an advocate and how powerful of a relief you can also provide the staff. And that can also help the kids a lot too.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say like it was almost 50-50. I would be able to help the kids. And also I can't tell you how many times I also had staff coming to me in
Sure.
years or like burnt out or like struggling with their own personal stuff, who just needed someone to listen and to validate and to like kind of help them through some stuff too. And I feel like so important because I remember when I was 18 and I was getting paid 8.25 an hour and I had 20 kids running around. that that wears on someone.
Yeah.
So yeah, that would also be my I guess I don't want to say advice, but like my insights or my personal experience of what I did that I felt worked for me, and it wasn't perfect, but it was this is still very very new.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure we can kind of clean it up, and we're doing the best we can, and also we can always be doing better. So yeah, that's kind of my thought.
I absolutely love that. That really just invigorates me. Just the open-mindedness and the ready hands, ready to kind of take on the task, however it might come up. And I'm really glad you mentioned how that integrates with the staff. We hear that all the time with our association. Y'all have mental health training for working with kids all the time, but what about working with the staff, these teens, and you've experienced this firsthand where, you were 17 or 18 years old working as a camp counselor, and it is a tremendous, wonderful job to have. It really is. But the reality of spending a summer, especially in overnight context where you are away from your family and friends, it's really still a life-giving experience, but there's a lot that can happen in the personal lives of these students. And so you having the humility to recognize that and to see that and to be accessible in a way that you kind of take the brunt of some of the heavier things that a lot of these campers might bring to these staff is such a blessing to them, I would imagine, in a holistic way and a collaborative effort with the organization as a whole. So I can only imagine the benefits that comes from that kind of um, relationship, the therapeutic relationship, if I can even say that. So, and the personal relationships, right? That's what it all boils down to.
Absolutely.
That's beautiful. Well, Ryan, I want to be mindful of your time, folks. I know that we're recording this during the camp off season, if I can say I say that with hand quotes if you're hearing this and not seeing this live. But for therapists, there is no off season, and so he is still addressing mental health needs in his community. So we want to be mindful of that and let him go. But Ryan, thank you so much for dedicating your time to explaining how this all works in a deeper context. We know we have that video, and I can try to link that to any show notes or anything like that. But this really gives a little bit more insight that I think camps can use and decision makers can use to see how could this work for us. So thank you. This was huge.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I hope we keep this going. This is definitely something worthwhile having, and I can definitely see only benefiting kids in the future for sure.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure. So thank you for listening to the New England Camp podcast, and we'll catch you next time.